Hello, welcome to this video where I'm going to be sculpting the portrait. Somebody was asking on my Patreon page for a portrait demo, and so I'm going to get it as far as I can within 1 hour of sculpting. So I have my stand. This is just a block of wood with a screw screwed into it and some clay on top. The clay that I'm using is a cheap dollar store non-dry modeling clay. It comes in a bunch of colors, but I've melted those together to get this brown. And the only tool, if I need tools at all, the only tool I'm going to allow myself to use during this hour is this little tiny hammer. So let's go ahead and get into it. An hour is not very long to sculpt the portrait, so let's try to get as far as we can. So the first thing I'm going to do is build a what's called a block-in of the head. Now, this video was requested by somebody on Patreon, and so if you're interested in sculpture and you'd like to support the videos that I do on YouTube and the online courses I teach and things like that, then I really appreciate any support over there. And there's a bunch of exclusive demos on my Patreon page that I've done in the past, similar to this, like 1 hour demos. They're not cut or anything, I just leave the whole thing up. This one I'm going to put up for free on YouTube so that you guys can kind of see the format of those longer demos. But anybody that goes over and subscribes to my Patreon page for $10 a month gets access to all of the older demos, and I really appreciate it. And so what I'm going for in this shape is kind of a wedge shape, so kind of a shape that tapers towards the front of the face and is roughly the shape of the head. So kind of more blocky. You could think about it as kind of like a bloated triangle, like there's a, the top of the triangle that kind of curves around this way. The bottom of the triangle comes down to the chin, and then the back of the head. You can think of the head simplified as that kind of triangle, and then a wedge shape that tapers as it comes towards the front of the face. So I don't know if this is going to be a male portrait or a female portrait yet. We'll see how far once I decide. I'll just, for this one, because it's a sculpture from imagination, we're not using references or anything, I'll just kind of see how it develops and what it's looking like once I get the block in and some other things established. Let's remove some clay from the chest. Got to remember that the neck is tilted forward, so we want maybe a little bit more clay back here to give that angle of the neck coming forward this way. And so that's kind of what it's looking like. I want to be moving fast. I'm actually getting ready for there's a portrait sculpting competition that's coming up in September, and I'm excited for that, and so I'll be doing some more portrait-related things, try to keep you guys in the loop with some more content on doing facial feature studies and some other things. And of course, if you're really interested in the portrait, then I recommend checking out the portrait sculpting course, link in the description for that course. Got to give a plug in there because I worked really hard on those courses for the figure sculpting course, the portrait sculpting course, and the hand sculpting course. There's a lot of work that goes into it, and I really appreciate anybody that purchases those. So right now it's feeling more masculine, so I have to decide if I want it to be a male portrait, or if not, then I need to start switching things up at this point. Let's see, I feel like I've done a lot of more masculine portraits, so let's try to make it a little bit more feminine. So I'm gonna bring the forehead, lengthen the forehead up a little bit, and we're going to try to establish more feminine features, more rounded, kind of coming this way, a thinner neck, more slender. Let's see, can you see the shape of that head coming along? So I'm just trying to get a basic head shape from the side, and I'm just working as like a pancake right now. So very little actual details other than one angle and just trying to make that look nice. Let's thin out the neck, give this some more support. And I'll try to sculpt symmetrically, and then if we want later on, I can always tilt the head one way or another as it develops. I'll probably end up doing that. But for now, let's just try to keep things symmetrical so that we can tell that the proportions are working from side to side and that it's feeling accurate. Let's go ahead and flatten out this upper part where the clavicles will be, upper part of the upper chest, and think about that. Get the slope of those shoulders coming down. Let's see, I don't really need the tool right now. Let's actually zoom in just a little bit more. You guys can see. Okay. Back this up. Okay, so that's the, let's say for the block in, we want it to be a little bit more developed from the front. So again, a wedge shape, so like a knife blade or a wedge that tapers towards the front and gets wider towards the back. The widest point of the back of the head is just behind the ear, so it's not in the middle of the head. It's back more towards the back of the head is where it's widest, so somewhere like in there. So we want that basic taper to be accurate and to kind of feel like the mass of the head, which there's a lot more mass and clay in this back area of the skull than we realize. We see the facial proportions so much, and they're so important for, you know, conversation, for communicating with people. So we're always looking at the eyes, the face, the mouth as we communicate with people. So we tend to make those areas larger. That's just a common beginner mistake, is to assume that because this part of the head is so important, because it's so complicated and there's so much information in the features, then we just want to make it larger than it is. So to avoid that beginner mistake, let's go ahead and add plenty of mass right at the beginning towards the back of the head to say this is not going to be a beginner mistake sculpture. We're going to keep in mind the actual proportions of the skull, the cranial mass back here, and then the facial mass is this part up here. Let's keep that kind of smoothed out. With female, if we're going for a female portrait, which is what I've decided to do, we want to keep things nice and soft and rounded. Male features tend to be more blocky. Men tend to be more chiseled, more muscular, more bone definition in the skull and in the body. And women tend to have softer features, slender, less chiseled. Okay, I think we've got let's just a little bit more over here. So now that we have that, I'm trying to make sure I'm happy with the block in before I start to develop the profile, which is the next step. There is a video on the Proco 3D YouTube channel that goes over 10 steps to portrait sculpture. And that's a shorter video, but it's the steps I'm trying to keep in mind as we're going along. So I won't go through and name those steps, but that is a video you could check out if you're interested in a more like step-by-step guided approach to sculpting the portrait. All right, so now we've got a block in. This is what I'm talking about when I mention a block in. It's just the simplified shape of the head that allows us to draw guidelines, to start to build out the profile, side view of the head, and just gives us a place to build the forms on top of. So now let's go ahead and think about the profile. We want this to be an attractive female, which is difficult, very difficult to sculpt. It's easier to sculpt old, ugly, what would you say, characters. They are easier because when you're sculpting somebody that's attractive, then any deviation from what we're expecting to see when we see an attractive face, any asymmetry or anything like that, it detracts from the beauty and it becomes less attractive. And so that's why if you're going to take on a challenge, one of the most challenging things is to sculpt an attractive female, though it is one of the most beautiful things that you can sculpt. So it's great to try, even though it is a challenge. It's always going to be a challenge. But we are sculptors. We do not shy away from challenges. We sculpt them. So here I've got the nose. I'm going to start thinking about, like, do I like how this profile is coming along? Very simple, just a indication of where the forehead transitions to the nose, to the mound of the mouth, not even separating the lips at this point, to the chin. The chin, I feel like, is still a little bit masculine. That chin, we want to have a little bit less prominence in that chin. We want this to be a very feminine sculpt. Let's dig out a little bit for the eye sockets, even though that we have plenty of room because we thin this out, but I just like to remove some material around the eye sockets to build out the features around there on top of. Whereas if you start with it too thick anywhere, it's hard to get the soft, subtle forms of the body by removing clay, especially when you're working mostly by hand and trying to do it quickly. It's much easier to add those forms by adding little pieces of clay and softening those up. So whenever you can, I encourage students to sculpt thin and then slowly build out the thickness with little pieces of clay. And I've said that a lot because it's very important. I mean, all of this stuff, a lot of the principles are easier enough to understand, but it's just applying those principles to different situations and new sculptures that becomes difficult, and that's where the masters really separate themselves from the novice. Okay, so there's that profile. I feel like the nose is maybe just a little bit low, so I'm just going to push it up a little bit. Let's push it up. And now that looks way worse. But that's okay. We're just going to push things around until we feel comfortable with it. I'm also going to kind of push the forehead a little bit, because I felt like the transition between the nose and the forehead was a little bit off. So, and then while we're working on the profile, let's say that she's got her hair up in a bun, a high bun. And that'll just give us a little bit more visual information to play with as we're building out this sculpture. Let's say she's got a lot of hair in this kind of messy bun. Some more on this side. So very sketchy at this point, just establishing that profile. I think I'm a little bit more comfortable with that. And what are we? We're just coming up on 15 minutes in, and we've done the block in. Now we've started with the profile. The next thing we're going to be doing is working on the bone structure. So now I'm going to be thinking more about what's happening with the bones and the skull. The skull is really important if you're going to study the bones of the body. If you're going to study any anatomy at all, let it be the skull, because the skull, you know, it's the head's where our attention goes when we see a sculpture. If it's a figurative sculpture, our attention goes to the head, the face, the eyes, and the skull is the framework for the head. If you can understand it and accurately represent the skull, then you will understand and be able to represent the rest of the portrait, because that skull is just the scaffolding. It's the framework. Those, like when you see the scaffolding of a house, the timbers and everything, and then all the drywall and everything goes on top of that. The skull is what gives everything the structure, and if you can get that right and get those measurements right and everything, then you are well on your way to doing a nice sculpture. Now, one of the things, now that I'm looking at it more from the front view, one of the things I want to be thinking about is having it be kind of a feminine shape, more oval, thinner chin. I added some clay on the chin, but that made it look a little bit masculine, so I'm careful. Because I am a man, in case you didn't notice, I generally think that we tend to make sculptures look like ourselves, and because I'm just a masculine model of masculinity, then almost all my sculptures tend to lean towards looking more masculine. So I have to counterbalance that and realize, oh, I'm gonna naturally, without thinking about it, I'm gonna push this in the masculine direction. So I need to make sure that it's nice and feminine, and keep that in mind as I'm working. So we got the cheekbones. Let's go ahead and add those and widen those out a little bit. Keeping it symmetrical, looking at it from side to side. Looking at it from above from time to time also helps. Let's widen the back of the skull while we're at it. There's going to be a lot of that needs to be done. I'm also just moving my hands in the direction of the hair, so that's something that you can do as you're building up the forms. You can just think, oh, this lock of hair is traveling in this direction, so I can just put the clay in that direction and kind of bring it along, and then the texture kind of plays along with whatever form you're laying in. And so that's just an easy way to help your sketch, your sculpture sketch, help with the design early on, or help indicate the design just by the way you're laying in pieces of clay. Can help it look more professional, more masterfully done when you think about those little things. Same thing if you're laying in a muscle group or something like that, thinking of the direction that it's traveling in, and then just adding clay in those areas at that direction. So there's some fat pads that kind of smooth this transition from the cheek to the eye socket, and it kind of travels up. There's kind of this form that travels up towards the ears. I haven't put the ears in yet, but I kind of have in mind where those are going to be. And now that I've added some mass on this side, starting to feel a little bit lopsided towards this side, so I want to address that by adding some more clay around for that hair on the back. Just taking these little coils and wrapping them. And let's say that it's like a loose bun, so that there's some hair that kind of hangs down a little bit, and something like that. And if I don't like it, I can just switch it back. I didn't like that too much, so I'm just gonna adjust it back. Everything moves really quick when we're doing these quick sketches, and it's soft clay, so it's really easy to move things around. There's a pro of that, which is that you can make changes swiftly, and the con is that you got to be really careful as you're working to not mess up the details that you've already established, the things that you do like about the sculpture. You don't want to be constantly changing those and having to fix that that is a pain when you get an area that you want and then you go work on another area and you're like squishing the eyes and the nose and everything. It's something that I've done many times, but it is always frustrating. So now I'm going kind of checking back with the profile, with the side profile, and making sure that the forms I'm doing are melding with that front profile of the face, that it feels right. I don't have references, so I'm just trying to make something that feels like it could be a person, that a person could look that way. And so just going for basic generic proportions. The eyes in the middle of the head, between the top of the head and the bottom of the chin, eyes should fall about in the middle. The ears at an angle, kind of following that angle of the jaw back towards the back of the head. Widest point, we talked about that, towards the back of the head. Cheekbones kind of coming up and wrapping back towards the ears. Let's feel like this hair is getting a little bit out of control, maybe. Not out of control, but just a little bit large compared to the face. But I think the face is still very thin at this point, which is fine, totally fine. That's what we want, is something that's thin so that we can add the clay on top. Let's widen out those cheekbones, that cheekbone that travels back. And then there's also an arch. On me, it's pretty prominent that travels back. What is that called? The superior temporal line, I believe, that kind of starts at the outside of the eyebrow and travels back. This is very soft on women especially. On men, it's more prominent generally. But I do want to just give a little indication of that's what the form is doing. And then I'll soften that up because we don't want it too rough. Let's keep widening those cheekbones. The cheekbones are usually the widest point of the facial mass, so they're not as wide as the back of the cranial mass, but of the facial mass, just before the ears is usually the widest point of those cheekbones. And then once I am comfortable with this width compared to the back of the head, then I'll start developing the shape of the face with the chin and other things. I think that's looking a little bit better. I might still add some, but let's add some clay on the chin, the jawline, to get a better sense of the shape of the head from the front view. So the mound of the mouth is an important bony feature. The cheekbones and the eye socket. So I talked about doing the bony features. Now we've got some structure. We've got some of those bony features in place. I'll keep going with the jaw over here. And then once we're done with those bony features, then we'll move on to the, if we were sculpting a specific person, it would be the likeness from the front view. But because this is just a sculpture from imagination, we're just going to be looking at the front view and trying to get it to where things look good, look natural. I think this cheekbone needs to come up just a little bit to match the other side. And you just got to choose, like for example, I saw that this cheekbone is a little bit higher than this one. So I have to decide, do I want to lower this one or raise this one? Just when you're sculpting from imagination, just look at which side looks better and then copy that on the other side. I say copy it, but it's not like 3D. It's not like sculpting on a computer program where you can just copy or put it so that everything's always symmetrical. So it is a little bit more difficult than just copying the other side. But that's the basic idea, is just decide which side looks better and then move the other side to better emulate the side that you like. Okay, so let's start thinking about the features. Here I feel like this got a little bit too much with that outside corner of the eye socket felt a little bit rough. So I'm just gonna soften that up a little bit. Let's also soften right here with the cheeks. That's feeling a little bit better. Let's go ahead and add in the ears. Wait, before I do that, let me soften this side too so that they kind of match. Let's look at that from the front view. Starting to look good with the structure. Feels good. Feels pretty feminine. Let me just tuck the nostrils on either side of the nose. I feel like the nose is looking a little bit strange, so I'm just gonna kind of tuck in just a little bit and lift some stuff. The profile kind of gets messed up here and there, but I'm not too worried about it. I'd be more worried if I was doing a portrait where I wanted to get as close as I could, then I'd establish the profile and then be very careful not to mess up the profile. But for this, you know, we're just having some fun. We're just making it up as we go. We're just let's put in the ears, kind of at an angle. Just a piece of clay. Think of it as like a slice of apple. Just a kind of C shape that's traveling back, again following that line of the jaw that goes back towards the back of the head. And we're just gonna try to make sure that we put the ear at the same area. You can look at it from above. Oh, I feel like this needs to come out a little bit more. From above, I see that there's like a little bit of clay missing, feels like in this area. So I can address that by just adding some clay. Checking it from above is really helpful. Yeah, that shape of the head is feeling a little bit strange from above. So let me round it off. It should be an egg shape that is thinner down here at the bottom, and then it gets a little bit thicker towards the back. And right now it was like too thin in here. It looks like instead of an egg, it looks like, what are those plants that's got it's like a bulb at the bottom and then it kind of squishes in. So it's got, do you see that? What are those called? What am I thinking of? Anyway, some sort of squash that looks strange, but not what I was going for. So let's go ahead, soften that transition up by adding some clay here to get that soft egg shaped transition. And we're making some progress. What are we coming up? We're coming up on half an hour, and I think we're making some good progress as far as structure goes. It feels good. Feels, you know, feels like the proportions aren't terribly off. It feels like somebody could have these proportions. Let's go ahead and just give a little bit more of an indication of what's going on with the neck. Just a basic cylinder, tapers here at the bottom. Let me just, using both hands to kind of scoop that clay down into the side. And then we'll add the sternocleidomastoid muscle, which starts back behind the ear and then wraps down towards the clavicle. It's an important muscle and helps give us some more visual information of what's going on with the head. If the head is tilted or turned, then those sternocleidomastoid muscles will give us an indication of what's happening as the head moves. But there, we got just a little bit more information. I'm gonna come in right there, push it in. Okay. Let's see, how's that feeling? Feels a little bit better with the neck. All right, let's see. It is coming along. Let's go ahead Let's go ahead and thicken up this just a little bit. We want to keep that neck thin. Thick necks will make your sculpture look more like a wrestler or a football player, more masculine if you have thicker necks. So if you're sculpting a child or a woman, then you want to make sure that that neck is not becoming so thick that it pulls it in the masculine direction. I keep it nice and feminine. Let's go ahead and add a little bit to the eye socket, see if we can't develop this a little bit more. I got to be careful because the only tool that I'm going to be using if I make any mistakes is this hammer. And so I'm going to try to do as much as I can by hand. Just say, okay, here is that outside corner of the eye socket. And kind of move that around to give an indication of what's happening there. Let's also think about the lips, separation for the lips. We could maybe put in just a little bit of clay. But again, got to be careful with the clay. I'm trying to use smaller pieces of clay and really be thoughtful as where I'm laying those in. We want to have that separation of the lips to be feminine, so I'm thinking about making the lips not too thin. Men tend to have thinner lips, and so because we're going for feminine, I want to make sure that there's some thickness to those. Let's see, and I'm laying in more precise that profile, and then I'm gonna build out the lips from the side. So there you can see just a separation of the lips, and then let's add a little bit more to the bottom lip. Boop. And making those sound effects will help as you're sculpting. Boop. As you add pieces of clay, just to make things more interesting, as we always try to do when we are creating something for others to see. Okay, there we have a better sense of what's happening with the separation of the lips. So, but now because I've only added that middle area, it just looks like, she's got pursed lips, but she's just kind of a serious pursed lips. So we'll build those out a little bit differently, but let's make sure we have some space in the nose. Want to keep that nose on the center line so it can be pushed easily. So I want to be careful not to move that around too much. I'm just going to soften this area a little bit, and just moving things around. Oh, and I don't like that, so there we go. And then the nostrils from the side view. Oh, I don't like how that nose, I don't like those changes that I made to the nose. Let me see if I can fix any of that. Let's push this down a little bit more. And women tend to have a nose that is a little bit more upturned, so it typically won't be as pointed down, or the angle won't be pointing down as much. So women and children have a more upturned nose generally, speaking in general terms, as we always or as we generally do. We generally are speaking in general terms. All right. Okay. Let's see. Let's push this. And then the nostrils. So I was saying the nostrils come back about twice the distance from the tip of the nose to where it transitions to the lip. The nostrils will come back a little bit more from there. So here I feel like I want the lip to be moved even a little bit more forward. There we go. And it's coming along. I'm trying to slow down, make less big dramatic changes, and think more about where do I need to add a piece of clay to make it just a little bit closer to a finished sculpture. If I could only add one more piece, where would I put that piece? And let's see. Okay, let's go ahead. That's looking a little bit better with that side profile. Let's go ahead and move on to the eyes. See if we can't establish the eyes a little bit better. So for this, because we're sculpting so small and just sculpting mostly by hand, I basically just want to give an indication of where the upper eyelid is. And even just with that little bit of information, you can get a much better sense of what's happening. So I'm just thinking about only that upper eyelid. So just look at that. Just that little piece of clay. Do you see how that shadow that's cast just gives a sense of the eye, even though there's almost no information there? It's just one piece of clay. And I love when you're able to add that in. Now the trick is getting the other side to match, which is much more difficult. But if you can put in that piece of clay, just think about the upper eyelid, and then without anything else, it already starts to feel more like an eye. So let's see if I can't replicate a little bit. So first thing I need to do is push the eye socket a little bit forward to match. I'm going to look at it change the angle, look at it more from above to make sure that those eye sockets are roughly symmetrical from side to side, because if you start going in and trying to add that eyelid and the details of the eyes when the eye sockets aren't even symmetrical, it's going to be impossible to make it look to make the eyes match. So a lot of the difficulty with making the eyes match in drawing or in sculpting is just making sure that the underlying structure is sound, that's a solid foundation to build on. Again, thinking about the skull and that eye socket. So I'm looking at it from above. I'm also going to just add some details to the forehead to make sure that that's looking good before I move on and try to establish that second. And I'm turning this sculpture to the side and paying attention to this line right here as I turn it to make sure to see where I need to add more clay. So I feel like the cheek right there could come out more of a cheek on that side. And then same thing with the eye socket. Let's see, the eyebrow. I feel like the shape of this 3/4 view was just a little bit off, a little bit flat. So I'm coming in, looking at it, and then gonna do the same thing on the other side. It's actually not looking terrible on the other side, but maybe just a wee bit more on this cheek. Just a little peck on the cheek for that. And all right, let's see, the moment of truth. Let's see if we can duplicate that on the other side. We'll just give it our best shot. So we just want to add a piece of clay over here, and it's always going to be tricky. So, and then kind of softening that up. I'm like defocusing my eyes to see it kind of blurred to try to match those up, and I'm just paying attention to the shadows. So I just want that shadow of that upper eyelid to mimic the other side. And it's not terrible. And then let's go and let's see. So there you can see that that shadow kind of matches. It's maybe not quite symmetrical, but for now, let's use our tool. So we have our tool. So let's just push just a little bit right there, and then smooth things out. Okay, that feels okay. It's not perfect, but we'll say that that's a good starting point. So let's go ahead and add in a little bit of information for the eyebrow. The eyebrows, we're not going to indicate them with texture or anything. We just want to say, here it is with a little piece of clay to give a form. In general, the hair, eyebrows, and then the hair itself is a lot softer than we realize. So we want to keep things nice and soft. And the only indication of that eyebrow is just going to be a slight raised, like hill, that'll just say, oh, here's an eyebrow. And that feels pretty good. That first eyebrow feels pretty good. So let's go try to match it on the other side. And we're coming along. Let's see, what do we got? So we're at about 40, what is that saying? 42 minutes is what I'm seeing on the camera. So that means that we're not doing too terrible. We've got over 15 minutes to try to not ruin this. That's the thing with sculpting, with portrait sculpting especially, is that sometimes you get it to a place where you really like it, and then as you try to finish and work on the details, you're able to get it to a place where you hate it. And that's something you got to be careful with, not to mess up the things that you did like. And trying to kind of raise this outside corner of the brow, because men typically have an eyebrow, and like their eyebrows are more straight across the forehead. Women typically have more raised eyebrows. You'll see like sometimes a surgery that they'll do is like pull this skin back to accentuate that raised eyebrow look. For that's a common thing for women to make look like the eyebrows have more of that arch and are raised a little bit more. Okay, now it's coming along. Let's see, do we want to do, I'm debating if I should do the lower eyelids or move on to the mouth, and get the mouth a little bit better established. I feel like the nose needed to come over just a little bit and soften. Okay, let's see. Let's go back to the mouth. The mouth is very tricky, a very tricky area. The beginner mistakes are just not treating a lot of the times the upper lip like a mass of its own. There's actually quite a bit of roundness. So imagine that the sculpture had a mustache, and I'm going to lay that in right now. So she's got like a mustache, but this mass of, let's say, the mustache area is present even in women because the lips are bending, curving around the mound of the mouth, which has the dental mound, the teeth. And so there's a lot of mass. Not only is there a lot of mass in the lips themselves, but they're curving around that form of the skull of the dental mound or mound of the mouth. And so you want to make sure that you have that, that form indicated. So right now it is looking a little bit too much like a mustache, but we will address that. And then, let's see, let's go ahead and we'll use our tool to give just a little bit of an indication of the outside corners of the mouth. Let's see, right about something like that. Same thing on this side. Oh, that's maybe a little bit high. So something along those lines is going to be the corners of the mouth, but it's going to be a little bit wider. So let's go ahead and add in the soft pillowy forms. People generally know about the pillowy forms of the lips. So let's go ahead and add those in. 2 pillowy forms on the bottom and 3 on the top. Trying not to mess up that profile that I've established. And then it's going to soften. The pillowy forms kind of soften towards the edge and are more, or the transition is more abrupt right along the center line. But around the edge is kind of soft hill for a transition. Soft transition. And not terrible. And then let's do that upper pillow. And then we'll go to the other side and repeat those. And I'm pushing things. Let's see. How is that looking as far as the shadows go? It's not looking terrible. It's not quite there yet, but it's not looking terrible. Let's go on the other side and do the same thing. So bottom pillow on this side, and then mouth needs to be a little bit wider. So push it a little bit wider. Soft pillow, transitions toward that outside corner of the mouth. Let's see. I'm trying to judge. Actually, I think I might want to blend this. Actually, I think I'm okay with the width. We'll have her mouth be not super wide. Let's blend this form of the cheek. We want to keep that soft, so I'm coming across the form and kind of blending that a little bit. How does that look? A little bit better. Let's do the same thing with the cheek down to the chin. Kind of soften that form, or that transition between those two. Everything nice and soft as we're trying to make this very feminine. Let's see, that's looking a little bit better. Okay, let's see if we can't copy and paste. That's the challenge. Copy and paste some of those attributes onto this side over here. Starting with softening things up just by coming across the form. Now, whenever you're texturing, I generally recommend that you come across the form instead of along the form. So the cheek, that bump of the cheek is coming this way, so I'm coming across it, over top of it, to clean it up. We can use our tool again maybe just to give a little bit more of a indication of the mouth. Let's say that maybe it's just like a little bit open. I'm going to kind of open it and then kind of press the forms back, and we'll see if I like how that looked. No, I think I made it look, now it looks like she's got some lip implants. So that was maybe something that did not add to the sculpture. Let's do the same thing with the nose over here. But who cares? This is just, it's just for fun. It's for fun. It's for fun. We don't need to be too worried about messing the whole thing up. What is this? What are we? Perfectionists? I guess we should be. But. Okay, let's see. Looking at it below. Let's get that other form of the lip up here. Okay. Then I'm going to try to kind of sharpen that transition under the chin. Oh man, I really feel like I messed up that mouth. Shouldn't have tried to open it, but that's what I get for taking risks, making changes. Let's go ahead and let's see. What are we at? There's not a lot of time. Let me just look at it. Let me just get a look at that. Would you look at that? Just look at it. Right. So I'm looking at it, getting a look at it. And what I'm looking for is just things that stand out to me as, as could I take a picture of this and then put it as the thumbnail for the video, and would people want to click on that? That's what, as an artist, that's what I'm always thinking about, is how to get people to click on my thumbnail. No, I'm just seeing if anything feels off, if if there's anything in the structure or anything like that doesn't feel like it's working. If it's starting to look attractive, I wanted it to look and feel attractive, and I feel like it's slowly getting there. It's maybe not there yet, maybe moved away with the changes on the lips. But let me go and try. We're going to be bold. We're going to try to add the lower eyelid and see if we can't better define these eyes. I'm just going to come with the tool and just slightly press down the eyes. Yeah. Yep, that's a lower eyelid. So now let's see if we can do the same roughly on the other side without making it hideous. Moving it around to make sure I'm placing it accurately. I feel like the cheek. That cheek needs to be raised up just slightly. Because if the cheek isn't in the right place, then the eyelid won't look like it's in the right place. Okay, let's come back with our nifty tool. It's hammer time. Okay. We have that. We're going to soften that lower eyelid. Let's see, how's that looking? Okay. All right, what do we have? We have 5 minutes. 5 minutes to make this the best sculpture I have ever done in 1 hour. Can it be done? Who knows? Let's go ahead and add a little bit more. There's kind of a mass on the outside corner. Oh, let's see, where am I? On the outside corner of the lips, the nodes of the mouth. So let's just go in and add just an indication of those. Blend that. And soften it. And the same thing on the other side, though the other side seems like it already has a little bit more of that mass. Let me see. And I'm looking at the profile again, that side profile. And same thing over here, a little node of the mouth, a little bump that's kind of angled a little bit, and it's right at the corner of the mouth. That will help breathe some life into the sculpture. Okay, let's see. Going to, at the risk of destroying everything, I'm going to just tuck the lips up again a little bit. Oh my goodness. That just... You know, I can see why people don't use a hammer that much when they're sculpting. It's all becoming clear. I can see why they have different tools instead of hammers. Though maybe if the sculpture was larger, then the hammer would be a little bit better. A little bit better of an option. You could do a lot. People always are talking about, oh, what type of clay do you use? Oh, what type of tools do you use? You know, it's more just learning how to sculpt, and then you can use whatever you have. Whatever you have will work if you have the knowledge to turn it into something great. And before we go, I also wanted to give a little plug for my ebooks, An Artist's X-Ray Vision. There's one on the male figure and one on the female figure. They're just $10, so for $10 you can get that ebook, and it really helps me out. There's a link in the description for that as well. If you guys are interested in learning, I hope you'll take my online courses or support me over on Patreon to get more of these types of demo videos where I just walk you through the process and do some sculpting along with you guys. And the Patreon just helps support all the work that I'm doing, and so I really appreciate that, as well as the courses. There is going to be a sculpture competition coming up pretty soon, so make sure that you're just following me on places like Instagram at AndrewJosephKeith15, and then keep an eye out here on YouTube and on the Proco3D YouTube channel. I'll let you guys know once that is going, and there'll probably be like an email list or something to get on to participate in that, and that should be really fun. Last time it was great. We had some great sponsors, and there's going to be some cash prizes and stuff. So you can join anywhere in the world. You can join that online figure sculpting competition. That'll be in the next little while. So I think it's still a month or two away, but just keep your eyes out for that. Make sure you're subscribed with the notification bell. And okay, I think that's it. We are out of time, so whether it's finished or not, it is finished. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. We're gonna move the camera down a little bit and get a final look at this 1 hour portrait sculpture from imagination. Let us get a nice, let's see, can I get the sculpture from behind so it's like a hair light? Oh, there we go. Nice. All right, let's zoom in a little bit. Make sure that we are in focus. And let's see. Okay, so for the final reveal, oh, I don't like that angle exactly. Let's go up just a little bit. There we go. Okay, for the final reveal, there is our 1 hour portrait sculpture study in non-drying modeling clay, female portrait. Oh man, I don't think I like it very much. It's not that great. It's not that great. It's not that great, but it is done. So whether, oh, I think maybe it's this, just right there. That looked a little bit too intense of the form, so maybe just softening that. Okay, well, I guess I'm over time, so I'm cheating now. Okay, well, there we go. There it is. Hope you guys liked the video. Be sure to follow, subscribe for more, hit the like button, and I will see you guys in a future video. Stay creative, stay productive.